Welcome! Today we're diving into profound stories by John Willis and Derek Lewis, and we're going to uncover this really fascinating kind of hidden connection between the last man to walk on the moon and the very birth of modern quality control. It's an incredible tale.
So our story kicks off in probably the most unlikely place you can imagine, the moon. It's up there that astronaut Gene Cernan made a really personal promise to his daughter just before he blasted off for that final lunar mission.
Now, you've probably seen that famous painting by his fellow astronaut Alan Bean. You know the one. It shows the name Tracy written right there in the moon dust. Well, that painting was actually inspired by Cernan's regret, a wish he talked about years after he got back.
Bean's painting is, it's absolutely beautiful, but it's what you'd call artistic license. It totally captures the romance of the idea, right? But it's not actually what happened up there. It's a really lovely fabrication.
So what really happened then? What did Gene Cernan actually do in those final moments as the very last human being to walk on the moon?
Well, the truth is something a bit quieter, a lot more personal. He actually dropped to one knee, and he carved the initials of his little girl, Teresa Dawn Cernan, TDC, into the lunar soil. Just a father's simple final act on another world.
Okay, so you're probably wondering, how on earth does this story from space connect back to quality control on Earth? Well, the link is Gene Cernan's mother, Rose. You see, to pay for his engineering degree, she worked for years at this pioneering manufacturing plant called Hawthorne Works. So let's jump in our time machine and go back to Hawthorne Works in the 1920s. Now, this place was a hub of incredible order and innovation, which is just wild, because it was literally across the street from Al Capone's chaotic Cicero headquarters. It was right here, at Hawthorne, that two absolute giants of management theory first crossed paths. You had a young, ambitious engineer named Joseph Juran and a visiting physicist from Bell Labs, Dr. Walter Shewhart. And let's just say, sparks flew. We're talking a fierce professional rivalry.
Juran's first impression of Shewhart? Oof. To put it mildly, he was not a fan. He basically saw Shewhart as this ivory tower academic, a theorist who was completely, utterly out of touch with the realities of a factory floor.
And get this, decades later, his opinion hadn't really changed. Even in a memorial tribute after Shewhart had passed away, Juran's praise felt, well, pretty backhanded. He kind of painted him as a showman, a competent promoter who just wowed people with fancy new concepts. And then he delivered this absolute stunner. He pretty much suggested that Shewart's ideas weren't even that original, that they were just mixed in with a bunch of other ideas. Now, that is an incredible claim to make against the man everyone agrees founded the entire field. So you have to ask, why? What did Juran find so threatening about him?
The answer to that question, it turns out, lies in a single moment of absolute genius, a moment that Juran himself would have seen with his own two eyes. The date you need to remember is May 16, 1924. On this day, Walter Shewhart sent his simple one-page internal memo to his bosses over at Bell Laboratories.
And this simple memo, with just a little hand-drawn diagram on it, it introduced the world to something called statistical process control. Now, you've got to understand how revolutionary this was. Before this, quality was all about inspection, checking products after they were made. Shewhart's idea was to use stats to monitor the process itself, to predict and prevent defects before they even happened. It was going to change industry forever.
See, Shewhart's idea was a total game changer because it gave us a whole new way to think about variation in any process, whether you're making toasters or launching rockets. Let's break down his core concept.
So Shewhart said there are two types of variation. First, you've got chance cause, which is just the natural expected background noise in any system. Then there's assignable cause, and that's variation that comes from a specific, identifiable event. But what's really cool here is how another legend, W. Edwards Deming, later tweaked the language to common and special cause. A subtle shift, but it puts the focus on improving the whole system.
And Deming didn't stop there. He also took Shewhart's three-step improvement process and expanded it into the now famous four-step plan, do, study, act cycle. He changed Shewhart's word check to study because he wanted to emphasize that this is about learning and analysis, not just ticking a box.
So, let's circle back. We've got this picture from Juran of an impractical, out-of-touch theorist. But then,
A chance discovery decades later revealed a completely different man.
The story is fantastic. It starts with a statistician, a guy named Justin Smith, who's at his friend's house and spots a first-edition copy of Schuhart's landmark book just sitting on the bookshelf. The friend has zero connection to statistics, no idea why he even owns this really specific technical book.
So Smith opens it up, and inside there's an inscription from Walter Schuhart himself. Turns out the owner of the book was Schuhart's namesake, and his mother had basically grown up viewing the Schuharts as surrogate grandparents.
And here's the best part. As a little girl, she couldn't pronounce the name Walter. So you know what she called the formidable founder of statistical process control? Uncle Wawa. I mean, come on. That one detail just paints a completely different picture of the man behind all these complex ideas.
The inscription in that book, dedicated to that little girl, it reveals this warm, kind, and deeply human person, a version of Walter Schuhart that Joseph Juran's account just completely, totally missed.
So when you boil it all down, what can we take away from this incredible story? Well, first, that big innovations often come from really surprising human connections. Second, that understanding variation, that common versus special cause, is absolutely fundamental to improving any system. Third, a person's public legacy can be miles away from their private reality. And finally, that real progress always depends on building on the work that came before.
And that kind of leaves us with a final thought, doesn't it? True genius is so often quiet, it's misunderstood, and it's way more human than the legends we tell. The question is, who are the quiet geniuses in your world, and what are you maybe missing about them?